Hey there, I'm Joey Santos, the online pastor here at Christ Church. Welcome to CC Life Plus. Thank you so much for checking us out. Listen, you probably saw a lot of content here, right? For kids, adults, music, podcast. That's why we created this for you. So listen, go ahead, fill out this form right here because we created this with you in mind so we can connect. It's all about engagement. So we want to talk with you. We want to engage with you. We want to discover about new ways that we can grow together in Christ through technology.
With a melody, you surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. And you unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name, and I've been born again to your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. child of God. I am a child of God. I am a child of God.
Well, hey, Church of the Bar, good morning. Brad Wilson to you, Senior Minister here at Christ Church, and I'm excited to be with you today. Hey, and today is a big day. It's the game that never got finished, right? Bengals, Bills, but this time it's for almost all the marbles here in the playoffs. But before we get to that, we are going to get into our series that we started the new year with called Therefore. And we're going to continue on in this. We're in week 2 today. And going back to last week, I kind of want to set the stage with this, and this is going to kind of lead us into our first question. Last weekend, we were reminded of this important truth that Jesus has all the authority. And we talked about how when it comes to authority, there are some of us that maybe we have authority in our job. Maybe we have authority in our role in the home a little bit. Maybe some of us, we want to have more authority than we do, but it's important to note that when it comes to Jesus and our relationship with him, he has all the authority. And that's when we realize that, when we live that way, when we operate from that perspective that he has the authority, it begins to set up everything else in our life. And so we started this series establishing that baseline, because where we go from there, it's essential to have that being in place. And because of his authority, we talked about last week, he expects us to do what he asks us to do. And so his authority makes what we're going to talk about today, what we're going to talk about next weekend, not just suggestions or good ideas or interesting thoughts, but it makes these things commands, it makes these things instructions, it makes his words relevant to us in the sense that we're not only to hear them, but we're to do what they say. So let's jump into our first question today, kind of piggybacking on this authority idea. And this is for you and in your groups, and be honest, because it doesn't know good if you're not honest. So do you like authority, or are you someone who likes to challenge authority, right? There's some people that if you're not an authority figure and there's someone in a position of authority, whatever they say, you're going to do. There's others of us that we want to challenge authority. We want to push against it a little bit. We notice it in my family. It's interesting, the 3 boys in my house. It's interesting who pushes back, who kind of goes along with it, and sometimes maybe who's in the middle. But you see clearly that from a young age, there's some people that they will follow and they will respectfully do what those in authority say. And then there's others where it doesn't matter who's in authority, they're going to challenge it. So, first question today, do you like authority, or do you like to challenge authority, right? Do you, by liking authority, do you submit to it and follow it, or do you challenge it? Take a few minutes to talk about this, and then we'll be back to jump into our message today. Church of Our, welcome back. And let's jump into our text today. This is going to be familiar to you by the end of this series. Matthew chapter 28. We're going to read verses 18 and the first part of verse 19. 18 says, Then Jesus came to them and said, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. So, he has the authority. And because of his authority, what does Jesus want us to do? We just read that. Jesus wants us to make disciples of all nations. This is the main verb. This is our main work as his people. Right? If someone asks you, what does Jesus want you to do, or what does Jesus want from us? What's that work? What's that action he wants us to do? We know he wants us to make disciples. He's getting ready to leave. The church is about to be established, and in his last instructions or orders or commands to his disciples, when he's leaving, he says, I have all the authority. I want you to go and make disciples. And I don't think this is necessarily a big surprise for us. If you're familiar with church world, if you've grown up in the church, you've been a part of the church for any a stretch of time, you know that making disciples is something that's talked about. Even if you don't have a lot of church history, or you're not that familiar with the church, you kind of have this idea that the church wants to go out and bring people into the church, wants to get people that are outside the church in the church, make them a part of it, right? Even at Church of the Bar, we want you to invite people that it's a perfect place for people that may be uncomfortable with church, may never thought about church. You're like, hey, come spend some time with us at Church of the Bar, and we want you just to experience it. We want you just to learn about Jesus, right? That people get that. But I think sometimes the hang-up is this idea of disciples is, what is a disciple? Is it the guys we read about in the Bible? Is there a particular training you have to go through? Is there particular things you have to be able to do? And so that can create some confusion. And I want to clarify this idea of disciple today. I don't think it's that complicated. I think sometimes we make it complicated, but I would describe a disciple simply as this: someone who loves Jesus, someone who follows Jesus, and someone who does what Jesus says. I don't think it's that difficult. Love him, follow him, obey him. That's what a disciple looks like. Now let's kind of go down this trail a little bit here, right? Because we love him, we follow him, obey him. How does that play out in our lives? Jesus says in John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commands. When asked what the greatest commandment was, Jesus said this. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. So the first and greatest commandment is to love God with everything we have. But he follows that up and says, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So if the most important thing that you can do and I can do, if the most important thing that we can do is to love Jesus, and we know that he says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And so if we love him, we'll do what he says. Do you see where making disciples kind of fits into all this and where things come together? Because he says, I'm leaving, I have the authority, go and make disciples. And we're reminded that he says, if you love me, obey what I command. And the most important thing you can do is love me. And that's where this comes together. I want us to be clear about this. See, sometimes people may ask the question, well, what's the best way to love others? You may be thinking that, well, what's the best way for me to love other people? And there's a lot of answers and a lot of good answers. There's a lot of ideas on how we do this, but Jesus is clear on what the best way to love others is, and that is make a disciple. Now, you may be asking the question, why? Why would you say that, or how can you say that? John 3:16 in verse 17 is very important. John 3:16 is a common verse, but don't let the commonality of this verse cause you to miss the purpose of it. It says that, for this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. God sent his son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. So in an essence there, what this verse tells us, and when you want to describe Jesus in simple terms, is Jesus is saying he didn't send his son to judge the world, but to save the world through him. That Jesus was on a mission of bringing salvation, of saving people. He wanted not to condemn and to destroy and throw away. He wanted to save people. And more than anything in the world, Jesus wants to save you. That's his focus. That's his mission. Now, sometimes we get confused with this, but there is a powerful message that people need to hear. And maybe as you're watching this today, you've never really heard that message from the church. You've heard from the church that you're not good enough, or that you don't do enough of the right things, or that you say the wrong things, or that you're a sinner, or that you've got to change all these things before you can be a part of God's family. Maybe you've heard that before, but what I want to make sure you hear today is that Jesus wants nothing more than to save you. That's his purpose. And that's our purpose. That's why we do this. We don't do this just so you can have a place to go and something to watch on Sunday. We do this because we want you to know how valuable you are to God. And we realize that we've often mismessaged this. And so instead of people hearing how valuable they are to God, we tell a story sometimes that says, well, you can be valuable to God if you do this, 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 and this. And that's not accurate. And so just as Jesus came to save the world, that's his purpose, that's what he wants. That's what he wants his people to be about. So second question this morning. Why is making disciples, right? I want you to describe this in your terms. We've talked about this, but why is making disciples? Like, break this down further. Why is making disciples the best way that we can love other people? Get in your group, talk about this, and really kind of put some teeth to this a little bit of why making disciples is the best way that we can love other people. And take a few minutes. We'll be back and we'll continue on with that. All right, 2 questions down, 2 more to go. Let's keep going this morning. And here's what we should realize. When it comes to life in general, it's easy for us to get distracted, and it's easy for us to lose sight of important things, especially in the church. It's easy for us to lose sight of the what that Jesus is calling us to. But I don't want that to be us. I don't want that to be you guys. Like, I don't want you guys to lose sight of the what about Church of the Bar and the ministry you're offering down there. See, you can be known as a lot of things, and you can be known for a lot of things at Church at the Bar, and a lot of good things. And I want to make sure that Church at the Bar, that Christ Church, that not only are we known for a lot of good things, but we're known for being places that make disciples, for being places where people can come and they can gather and they can be in community and they can realize how valuable they are to God, and where they can begin to start, if they haven't, their journey of faith with Jesus, and can ask questions and can get the answers they're looking for, and can be a place where they grow and develop, whether it's the Mason campus or whether it's with you guys at Church at the Bar, right? I want to make sure that we're known for being about the business of Jesus, that what was important to Jesus is important to us, that when people are a part of our communities, that they see that and they experience that. And so if Christ Church, if Church at the Bar is about the what, which is making disciples, how do we carry that out? Right? Let's kind of shift focus a little bit. Okay, if it's about making disciples, how do we carry that out? Here's one thing to write down today. It's we go. Quite simply, if we're going to be about his business, we have to go, right? He tells us that. If we're going to make disciples, we have to be willing to go. Go back to verse 19. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. And now this idea of going is an interesting idea, because depending on what you read or who you talk with, there are different ideas on what going means. There are some people that take this to literally mean going and make disciples is having the willingness to cross borders, to leave your home, to leave your state, to leave your country, and maybe it's to go somewhere around the world and share Jesus with people who've never heard about Jesus before. It's reaching as many people around the globe. It's very missionary focused with the gospel of Jesus. And I think that that's right, but I think there's more to it. There's some people that will talk about going and will refer to it as in the sense of, as you go, make disciples, stressing this idea that it's about where we're at in the moment, and whether it's in our community, whether it's in our workplace, wherever we go on a daily basis, that those are the areas which we're to make disciples. And I agree with that, but I think there's more. Some people will say that we have to have a willingness, going back to this crossing borders, we have to be willing to cross borders in our lives that we may normally not cross in order to reach people with the gospel of Jesus. What do you mean by that, Brad? Well, all of us there's certain people that we may not be comfortable talking with. Maybe the crossing borders is for us is talking to people that have come from different family situations. Maybe it's crossing some religious borders. Maybe it's crossing some racial borders. Maybe it's crossing some cultural borders, that instead of us looking and saying, I would never share Jesus with that person, we instead approach it differently and say, I'm going to share Jesus with that person. I'm going to reach them with the gospel of Jesus. And I think when you take these 3 things and put them together, I don't believe it's just one of them. I think you put them all together, and it helps to provide us with clarity, this idea that the go part is anyone who needs to hear about Jesus as his disciples, as his followers. We have to be willing, and we should be willing, to take the message to them. And so as we wrap up our time together today, I want to look at 2 important aspects of going. So if the going is anyone and any place and anywhere that needs to hear about Jesus, we're going to go there. Let's look at 2 aspects of going and take it a step further. The first thing I want to talk about is intentionality. We have to be intentional in our going to make disciples. That there's a purpose, there's a plan on what we're doing. I had a professor in college in psychology that really illustrated this lesson quite well. And he talked about relationships and the relationships people have. And he said that there's an interesting statistics back this up, that the more time you spend around a person, the more favorable that person becomes to you. And so he talked to our class and said, hey, if you guys are here and in class and there's a person that you like, there's a person that you're interested in getting to know, he said the more time you spend with them. So if you have multiple classes with them, the more that if you sit next to them and if you talk to them, the more time you spend with them, the more favorably they would look at you. And I was thinking to myself in class when he was talking about this, of like, well, that would make sense. And his idea being that for some people, it's like, hey, typically how relationships start and get moving is people spend time together, and the more time you spend with that person, they may not have liked you initially, they may not have been interested in you, they may not have been attracted to you, but over a period of time, some of those walls fall down, and then you can have people that initially, you hear stories about this all the time, that they hung out in the same friend group and there wasn't much attraction, there wasn't much interest, but over a period of time, they grew on each other, and then they grew into a relationship. Right? And it's all about, he stressed, all about being intentional. And making disciples is more successful when we have a plan, when we're being intentional about doing that. There's a story in Mark chapter 1, verse 29, starts in verse 29. This is the end, or this is the beginning of Jesus' ministry, excuse me. Verse 29 says, as soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. That evening, after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. A lot of fascinating things going on here. But Jesus is here in Capernaum, and he goes to Simon, or Peter's mother-in-law's house, heals her, and then begins to do this ministry, begins to serve these people from the house. He's healing people, he's preaching, he's driving out demons, and he's doing all of this with his kingdom in mind. See, we know he loves these people. We know he came to save these people, and he knows what they ultimately need. But he also understands that what they ultimately needed was salvation, and what they ultimately needed was a relationship with him so they could spend an eternity with him. He knows that as important as that was, in this day and age right there, in this time, in this moment, man, they needed this physical healing. They needed to be freed from these demons. So he's meeting an immediate need, and he's planting a seed. He's being intentional, and he's going to take care of their eternal need by meeting them where they're at. And when we think about this, and when we think about ourselves, that's where we fit into the place with people, right? We all know people that need to know Jesus. And that message about what Jesus can do for them, they need to hear it. But before they can hear it, there is something in their life that's, until they fix that, until they get through it, until they heal from it, they're going to have a hard time hearing what they need to hear, because they need to hear something first. And that's where we fit in. See, all of us have a list of unique experiences, and these unique experiences often, in a crazy way, they connect us with other people. Like when you've went through the wars of raising kids, and you've dealt with the difficulties of, the stresses of toddlers in preschool age, and you've dealt with rebellious teenagers, and you've dealt with the highs and lows of parenting, when you've dealt with the highs and lows of marriage, and at times you felt like your marriage was going to implode, and you've worked through that, or maybe you actually went through a divorce and God's brought you back. When you go through these things, when you've dealt with it and God's brought you through losing a job, or being treated unfairly, or whatever it is, and we have all these experiences we go through and we live through, that as God brings us through those things, sometimes, and we look back and we got the scars to see what we've come through, but we know that God continues to bring us through these things. These experiences, the pains, the highs and lows of life, are often the places and the avenue in which we connect with other people. And so sometimes what people need to hear from us first before they hear the gospel is, hey, this is how I was in a situation similar. I know it's not the same, but this is how God helped me get through this situation. And I think God can help you get through that situation. And it's often by meeting them in that moment, in that place, and approaching them from a perspective of, hey, you're dealing with this. This is causing you pain. I've dealt with this, and this is how I got through it. That often opens up the door for them to hear about Jesus later on. This brings us to our third question today. Why is it important for each and every one of us to be intentional with our faith? Like we've kind of talked about this, but with your faith, with my faith, why is it intentional? Why is it important for us to be intentional with how we live out our faith and how we share our faith with other people? Take a few minutes to talk about that, and then we'll be back to finish this up today. All right, Church of the Bar, welcome back. 3 questions now, we got 1 to go. Right? So we just talked about the importance of intentionality. And here's the second thing, the aspect of going, and that is the job is not done. But go back to Mark chapter 1, verse 35 says, very early in the morning while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, everyone is looking for you. Jesus replied, let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there also. That is why I have come. So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. Now, this is interesting. Jesus, we just read, Jesus was healing all these people, preaching, and he gets by himself to pray. Simon and the disciples, they go and find him, and they're like, what are you doing? People are here. They're looking for you. And in an interesting way, Jesus says, let's go somewhere else. They're probably thinking, what? There's people down there waiting for you. And Jesus says, let's go somewhere else to nearby villages so I can preach there also. And what I want us to see here is that it's a reminder that as awesome as what took place in Capernaum, Jesus was not satisfied with what had happened at Capernaum. It's not that he didn't celebrate it, not that he wasn't happy with the people, not that he wasn't excited about what was taking place there, but he knew that there was still more work to be done. There's still more territory to take back from Satan. And it's a reminder for us that we celebrate the wins, we celebrate when people come to know Jesus, but we can't stop or feel like our work is done. It doesn't mean we're not happy about it. It just means that we know that there's still more territory to take. There's still more families to be redeemed. There's still more communities to be redeemed. There's still more places and people that need to hear about Jesus. Still more people that need the opportunity to respond to his message. And so thinking about that and how the job is not done, here's the challenge or the question that I want to leave you with today. And that is, where do you need to go? All right? Or who do you need to go share this with? And what I want you to think about, our last question, and you can talk with the group, is who is that person, maybe that family, that place? Where do you need to go today to take Jesus and his message to someone or some place or some people that need to hear it? So let's wrap up, talk about that question. We'll be back to close things up, and I'm going to pray for you today. All right, we are back, and this is what I want to leave you with today. And I said this at the Mason campus. I'm going to say this to you as well. What we've started to do, what I'm committing to, and I'm committing our elders to this as well, is if there's someone that you want, that you're praying for, right? You think of, okay, who do I have? We have almost 50 weeks left in this year. And if there's a person or there's a family, like, I want them to know Jesus. I want them to be a disciple. I'm asking you that if you can share some names, and you can, obviously I'm not there, but and I know Joey's gone for a couple of weeks, but whether it's through Chad, or you can reach out to me on Facebook, you can send me an email from the church website. But if you are willing to share with me who is that person you're praying for, who you want to see know Jesus, who you're like, hey, my goal this year is I want to make this person, I want to make them a disciple. I want this person to, by the end of this year, I want them to love Jesus, to follow Jesus, and to do what he says. I would love to come alongside you in praying for that person. Not only myself, but our elders. And so I have a list going right now, and I have a number of names on there. People from the Mason campus have shared with me, and I want to make sure that if there's people that we can come alongside, if there's people that I can join you in praying for, I want to commit to doing that. Because like I said, up at the Mason campus, if our leadership, if our elders, myself, if we're not willing to jump in the fight with you and to pray for that person, that person or the place you're going to take Jesus to, if we're not willing to do that, we got no business doing what we're doing. So however we need to get that to me, like I said, whether it's sharing some people and someone sends me an email, or if you want to reach out on Facebook, or if you've got my number, feel free to reach out. However you can get that information to me, let's go ahead and do that. Please share that with me so I can add your people to the list and can begin praying for them alongside of you as well. So I'm excited. We're in week 2. Next week, we're going to head into week 3. We've got a couple weeks left in the series, and 2023 is going to be a fun year. And I'm looking forward to what's going to happen at Church of the Bar. I'm going to look forward to some of these people that you're praying for right now, seeing them take those next steps with Jesus. And I'm just excited about what God is doing with you at Church of the Bar, with our Mason family in general, whether it's in person, online, wherever that's at. God's doing some great things, and keep doing it. Let me pray for you, and I'll turn things back over to your leaders down there today. Let's pray. Father, thank you for how you love us. I thank you for everyone at Church of the Bar. And I just pray that they continue to, as we've talked about today, continue to love you, to follow you, and to do what you tell us to do. Father, I want to pray right now, even though I don't know the specific people. I want to pray for those that are on the hearts and minds of everyone at Church of the Bar.